Ghost Stories, Part 2 by Dana Lee. Chapter 10. You would get cold shivers that passed through you in some of the doorways and halls. One night, a security guard found a woman on the grounds. She looked lost. She had her hair upswept and wore a long skirt and high heels. As he asked her what she was doing there, she just stared back at him, so he radioed the front desk. The other two guards at the desk could see him on the monitor, but they said he was alone. I think nobody is ever really alone at that place. Chapter 11. I was going to entitle this chapter Secondhand Ghosts, as I thought I was out of my own ghost stories, that is, until last night. First, the doors upstairs were opening and closing. They are old doors, complete with skeleton keys, and the window was open, so I ignored them, thinking just the wind, although I knew better. I told Ron it's the ghost when he asked me about it. Then I went to the kitchen for a cup of coffee. It was after midnight. A hard rap, 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 at least 14 raps, a really loud banging came at the laundry room door. I jumped and squealed and ran. I was so startled. My heart was pounding. There was nobody there. I would have seen them from the window. The moon was bright. I would have heard them running, as I can hear someone walking past the house. Shiner, the puppy, was scared. He didn't even bark. Ron went running outside, looking all around, up and down the road, but we couldn't see anybody. Nobody is that fast. You can see quite far down the road. Later, there was a big bang. I went to check it out. The mirror on the bathroom wall fell down. The funny thing about that is that it didn't break, although it hit the hard bathroom floor. Nor did it break anything in its path. Now I'm quite curious. Shortly after I moved here about this time last year, I was in the bathroom late one night. I heard a woman screaming bloody murder, then a crash. I thought it was an accident. I looked out the window but couldn't see anything. I never heard an ambulance or a police car. Later I heard that a couple of years ago a man had pushed a woman and her child into an incoming train just across the street. They were, of course, both killed. I'm going to have to find out when that happened to see if perhaps these weird occurrences are related to that tragedy. Sometimes I see the woman's relatives when I'm out walking. They leave toys for the child by the tracks. It's sad. So I'll make the next chapter Secondhand Ghosts, maybe. Chapter 12. Ghosts a Dozen. Secondhand Ghosts, Part 1. Before I was born, my aunt lived in a little red brick Cape Cod on Kennywood Boulevard. They shared the house with the former owner, a ghost. Nearly everybody in the family had seen him. They said that he looked as real enough as if he was alive. He used to talk to my aunt. My aunt's husband at that time was abusive towards her. The ghost used to protect her from him. My mother was about the only family member that never saw him. My mother was a witch. She hated the house. She said that it was always cold. She said that the man was evil and she knew it. According to my aunt, the man's wife supposedly had left him and ran off with another man. My mother said that wasn't true. She said that he haunted the house because he had killed his wife and buried her in the basement. He knew she knew it, and that's why he never showed himself to her. But my mother did not see ghosts, only in her dreams. Over the years, we would always drive past the house. It was in a constant state of for sale. Chapter 13. Secondhand Ghosts Part 2. This chapter will begin with a slight amendment to the previous, that is, Ghosts and the Telephone. I had already mentioned how the children ghosts used to play on the students' telephone and answering machines in the dormitory of that school where I worked. If you're new to my ghost stories, that school was an old tuberculosis sanitarium. I had to go through some digging to prove my suspicions about that, too. They don't like it when students run away in the middle of the night there. They didn't like it when I scared them either. But I stray. I do have one other secondhand ghost story involving a dear friend of mine from Erie. When her father died, he called them on the phone as promised. Only when her mother answered, nobody was there, but they knew it was him. He had fulfilled a Houdini type of pact with them, proving that the spirit lives. I should also mention that this friend of mine is very psychic. She's the one that shared my nightmare the morning of September 11th, too, so it is possible that her father had some special talents. He has also been known to haunt the psychics at Lilydale, too. So the telephone is a sort of tool that some ghosts use to keep in touch. I myself have never had any supernatural fun with the phone besides knowing who is calling and those middle-of-the-night ones when somebody has died, but that's quite natural, I presume. But I do find an interesting correlation between the passing of the Irish Banshee with the invention of the telephone. I guess I'm a Banshee because I despise the thing, so don't worry, I won't call you when I'm dead. The telephonic prequel actually works well with the next story about Irish immigrants. Another father of another Irish friend of mine, the lady that I student taught with. I'm sure they'd all like for you to know their story. Her parents immigrated here from Ireland in the 30s, along with their best friend, just as my great-grandmothers had done. The father, he got up early every morning and made breakfast for the entire family. But breakfast always came with a song and dance because they could all hear him down there. It must be an Irish thing. Exactly a week before he died, he told his wife that when he woke up that morning, their best friend that came over with them, who was already dead, was sitting smiling casually at the foot of the bed, looking as alive as ever. His wife was worried about his story and took it as an omen. She wasn't surprised when they heard him hit the floor making breakfast the following week. He went out singing and dancing. Then his wife was too visited by her husband and their friend, both again sitting at the foot of the bed. It was not long after that she too died, a matter of months. They all came over and left together. The mother had confided the visit to my friend, her daughter, before passing. So, like mother, like daughter, she knew it wouldn't be long. My friend is a good Irish storyteller, and I can tell that she reached into her heart to share it. It's an emerald as far as ghost stories go, I think. Chapter 14, Secondhand Ghosts, Part 3. This will have to be my last ghost story until I hear another good one. This one is equally interesting and creepy. I believe it happened about 6 years ago. I met a paratrooper in a bar in the south side of Pittsburgh. It was Mardi Gras and he was leaving for the Middle East or someplace. I never saw him again and cannot even remember his name, for it was just a chance encounter, but for some strange reason, even unknown to himself, he told me a story that I'll never forget. A couple of years earlier, his twin brother died. There was a party at their house. Everybody was drunk. They had a sort of loft overhanging the family room. His brother was sitting there when he fell to his death, breaking his neck. He then told me that he not only saw his brother, that he not only looked to be very solid, alive, and real, but that he talked to him as well. He had no idea that he was dead. After he explained to his twin how he had fallen and died, he never saw him again. No sense, gone without a trace. He then went on to tell me that he never told anybody that, and that he had no idea why he was telling me now. I think it makes for a good ghost story. You hear about ghosts that stick around because they do not know that they're dead, but this is the only one that I have ever heard about firsthand. Of course, it may very well have been due to the fact that they were twins, and twins have a stronger connection than the rest of us. Chapter 15. Point Pleasant. There are more than a couple of reasons why I've put off writing down this particular experience. First, I'm not sure whether to call it a ghost story or not. That is, I have no proof, not even for myself, which I consider important because, believe it or not, I may be a scientist by nature, a naturalist, or what have you. So, we'll have to refer to my intuition. Not that I knock it, I probably have more faith in it than anything else these days, but you cannot prove intuition, not really. Not scientifically, anyways. Secondly, this tale is hardly a welcome poster to come to Point Pleasant. I'll never go back. Ron just said today, let's go back to Point Pleasant. While I was looking at my cool Mothman magnet hanging on the fridge. He must be joking. I don't advertise myself as a medium or anything. I do, however, realize that I have some gifts or sensitive peculiarities at this point. Maybe I've always known about. But at any rate, you cannot take this story as the gospel truth. I don't. I can't bring myself to any more than I could venture back to Point Pleasant. The irony of it is something somewhat astounding. I also can't say that I'm sorry that I went. It was an experience after all. When we first arrived, I just wanted a cup of coffee. Good luck with that. The place is eerie, a real ghost town. It just gives the appearance that it's actually inhabited. Upon closer observation, you'll see that nearly all the shops and restaurants are closed. Ask somebody, ask them anything, you'll get a glazed look and a grunt. Except for the guy in the Mothman shop, he does speak English. We stayed at the historic Low Hotel, a grand old establishment with a balcony dining room, gilded moldings, an old organ, and an extraordinary green-tiled fireplace in the lobby. We had an entire wing overlooking the river with what should have been a lovely view, complete with sitting room, guest room, and adjoining hallway. Peculiar, but the place was very dirty. Ron was getting angry with me, but he had to admit how filthy it was when I discovered dirty towels in the bathroom. I tried being nice, as he loves West Virginia, and said it's probably the nicest hotel in the state. Once again, he had to agree. But this story is not about insults. It's actually just the facts, or how I saw it for what it's worth. We both liked the Mothman film, and my best friend had read the book and loved it too. My other best friend wants to actually visit Point Pleasant in the worst way. After I had that weird experience with the voice in the drain, I was fascinated enough with the Mothman to make it my death card in my tarot. I did not see the Mothman, but I will say that I wouldn't doubt it, not after a trip to Point Pleasant. Just being there made me a believer. The place has the worst feeling about it that I've never encountered like that before. I've been to Gettysburg countless times, many other battlefields, but none of them had this feel like Point Pleasant. I'll call it a vibe, a disorienting feeling of pure badness. That sounds awfully childlike, but that's the best way that I can describe what I felt. Sheer negative power and influence. After checking into the hotel, we walked around the town, which took about a minute. There is an old Confederate general's house. We know things did not go so well with him. I learned some things, like I knew that there were some Indian wars about the area in the woods, I believed, but I didn't know that the Revolutionary War began there, and the Civil War was fought there too. Now I can say that I'm not surprised. As we were walking towards the point, the place where two rivers meet, where the bridge collapsed, where the natives buried their dead and believed that spirits abide, I was getting cranky. An old log cabin resides at the point. While there, Ron went right into the cabin, but for some strange reason at first, I couldn't do it. I sat down outside. I saw, in my mind's eye, Someone who I knew wasn't there, an Indian, a native. His hair was pulled back with some braids and two feathers, a red and a white. He wore buckskin, a vest and pants, and had a type of wrap, red and some other colors around his shoulders. He was talking to me. His lips weren't moving, but I could hear him in my head. He told me his name, which I didn't understand. He began to tell me such things as I'm not sure that it's even legal to put into writing. Another reason I've put off telling. Basically, he wanted me to set fire to everything. That's putting it mildly. He was very angry. There was a fierce wind that blew right through me all during this brief encounter. There's a monument there, alongside the cabin, an obelisk. He told me not to read it, to forget it all, and knock it down. My eyes began to well with tears, then a searing sensation tore through my intestines. Ron came out of the house and coaxed me in. He was getting very angry and angrier by the minute. He thought with me, but I knew it was the negative influence of the place, affecting different folks differently. Inside the house there hung a beautiful seed mosaic, huge, very detailed, something like 200 years old. It was lovely, but I had to get back to the hotel. I was very sick. Back at the hotel, I threw up 5 times, then passed out, only to awaken to what felt like a hangover, only I hadn't had a drink. I did, however, have a dream. Totally unrelated to the Indian, I believe. A woman in a gray, circa early 20th century type of gown with corset. I think she's somewhat related to the hotel, maybe even that particular room. She had brown, upswept hair and was very pretty. I painted her. Mrs. Gray, I call her. Then I got up alone and haunted the hotel myself that night in search of a cup of coffee that I never did find. I bet that's all that most ghosts want or are looking for anyways, a freaking cup of coffee. Point Pleasanters haven't heard of Starbucks. Whether that's good or bad is once again besides the point. I went outside for a smoke. The place was dead to the world, more quiet than the countryside, so quiet that itself was scary. I couldn't even hear any bugs or night birds. Then the strangest sight startled me for a moment. A huge gray Manx cat, who is a rare enough find himself, strutted down the street alone, totally mindless of me, as if I didn't exist, and he owned the place. I think he does. Then I heard a cough. A carny setting up for 4th of July scurried from his tent. That sent me back to our sitting room with the creepy view over the dark rivers. I painted pleasantry, trying to cheer myself. The following morning I did survive, as the hotel does provide coffee, thank God, in the morning. We went to the Mothman Museum, which is worth a trip as long as you don't try to spend the night. We also walked down along the rivers. Artists are working on an expansive mural there, and I couldn't help but notice how the Indian I saw looks like the figures there. I think the Mothman has probably flown away by now, along with everything else from Point Pleasant, but I wouldn't be surprised if you hear about him coming back either. Chapter 16, Animal Ghosts. Since I'm still up and don't want to try to sleep again tonight, I remembered that I hadn't told you about the happiest ghost in the house. And since I haven't, I should start at the beginning with my experiences with animal ghosts, since I've probably had as many animal ghost sightings as people anyways. My first experience is not a ghost story, not really. It's about my favorite dog, Hoagie, who passed away when I was 13. Hoagie was 16 when he died, so he was my big brother. Hoagie was always looking out for me. Being half collie, he had those shepherding instincts. I've actually written an entire little book about him already, though, so I'm just going to get on with his afterlife. I had a friend when I taught who was also a teacher, and I suppose we had something in common. For one thing, she was the only other person that I knew personally that had a nightmare during the morning hours of 9/11. Yes, she had the second sight, as I'd call it. Anyways, I had been in England and was relaying my trip to her. For some odd reason, I told her that I kept tripping over my own feet while over there. I'm usually a pretty graceful enough girl and just attributed it to their old uneven sidewalks and cobblestones. But my friend said, "Have you ever been to Lilydale?" At that time, I hadn't. Being from Erie, she frequented the place. It's a spiritualistic psychic community. She said there is a psychic there that says when you trip over your own feet, it's actually an animal spirit guide under your feet. I don't know why, but I've always thought that you had a big dog around you. That set me really to wonder because my best friend had told me that while I was gone, my mother had been calling out to Hoagie's spirit to watch over me. She was worried because I had gone to England alone. On to Lilydale then. Lilydale definitely deserves a mention among my ghost stories anyways, and this happens to be the chapter for it too. Lilydale is not easy to find, as it sits atop a hill nestled back in the woods of New York, not far from Lake Erie, and the internet maps that I had printed out at that time had it all ass backwards. After finally finding the place, I just pulled off and parked my car at the first spot I found. As I got out of my car, I felt a very deliberate and kind hand on my shoulder. I was not only not at all afraid, but felt guided and wandered off into the woods straight to their lovely forest chapel with the old stump and pet cemetery. While there I had intended on visiting with a psychic, of course. What other reason do folks have to venture to Lilydale? But something was stopping me. For one thing, there were dead birds littering the sidewalks. I mean, they were everywhere. It gave me such a bad feeling that I skipped the psychic altogether. When I got home, a family member died the very next day unexpectedly. When I lived in Oakland, I had this cat. She was wicked and hated me. She attacked me several times. Since she seemed to worship my ex, I left her behind with him. Right after I moved away, she died under my bed. She was not a very old cat. I took her death very hard, for although I believe she hated me, I still loved her and cared for her. Right after I moved into the new house, even before I had heard of her passing, I heard a cat clawing up the stairs, then crying at the window. There weren't any cats around. I didn't hear it anymore after that, though, so I think it was her, not some ghost cat associated with that house. When my brother's cat died, it was very sudden, a brain aneurysm. I don't think he even knew that he was dead, as the entire family had seen him after his passing. There he would be in his old spot, plain as day, looking alive as ever. Only the next minute he'd be gone. I haven't seen him in a while, though, since that, so he may have since passed on. Before I get on to the resident ghost, though, I must go back to a past chapter, as I have a somewhat of an update on that saber-toothed cat ghost that Shiner and I saw. Remember how I said that it was smaller than the North American saber-toothed tiger, as we know him? Well, interestingly enough, just about the time that we spotted him, and we've never seen him since, they discovered a load of saber-toothed cats in caves in the desert of Australia, and they were indeed much smaller than the North American variety. I'm not really saying that this was a definite premonition of the Australian discovery, however, as that does not explain why Shiner would have seen it too. If I remember correctly, those were marsupials too, and this area is heavy with possum. Who knows, but it is a strange mystery. Now, Packer. Packer is the ghost of a Brittany Spaniel that used to live here before us. He died here too. I've seen him, heard him, and sensed him. The first time I saw him running through the den, and I mistook him for Shiner, only thought he looked big. That is until Shiner walked in the door. He had been out at that time, and I was alone in the house. The next time I was sitting here in the dining room, and I sensed him at the French doors and heard him breathing. Shiner was upstairs in bed at that time. Just the other day I was sitting on the floor in the hallway going through the closet. I heard a dog's wet snuffle breathing from the door jamb. Thinking it was Shiner, I was ready to play. until I opened the door to discover nobody there. Shauna was in bed as usual. I have also seen him at night, just a flash of white outside the French doors. A couple of weeks ago, I was cleaning underneath the refrigerator when I found a lump of old dog food. It must have been Packers, as Shauna wouldn't eat that slop. Chapter 17, Secondhand Ghosts, Part 4. Before beginning this chapter, I want to say that in my quest of putting everything in writing and watching my ghost stories grow and grow, the next couple of years of my seasonal Tuatha De Danann publication will be devoted to the ghosts. This is, of course, in hopes that the world will stay on axis. This does, however, cut into my little creative exercises that I so much enjoy, so from time to time a little freebie will be supplemented. I have ideas for a little herbal and a rock book, for instance. You never know. The winter edition is the same as the others, that is printed in color on parchment, something like Mona's Ghosts. It's a poem, only this time about a dog. The ghost stories will be a little different. Printed in black and white pamphlet form, they will still contain artwork and photographs, either of dolls, ghosts, or haunting places. Anyways, on with the ghosts. I'm calling this chapter Secondhand Ghosts, although I can vouch to say the first house was most certainly haunted, as I'd spent time there. When I was an undergrad, a very good friend of mine lived in an old two-story white house, right across from the convenience store. It has been since torn down. She lived there with several other girls. The house was always terribly cold, so cold to need a sweatshirt in August. When I was there, I'd always hear somebody walking around upstairs, but my friend would say that nobody else was home. She also would tell me about their haunting experiences. It seemed the ghosts there, and she said it was an entire family, enjoyed messing with the blondes the most. The one girl had her head pushed underwater while in the bathtub. Another had her foot grabbed while in bed. I also noticed that some of the people did not seem to like themselves while there. It's as if their personalities would change and they would become disturbed, violent, or moody. My second bit is secondhand from my mother, who seldom has ghostly experiences except in her dreams. We were in New Orleans, the French Quarter, at the Hotel Sainte Marie on Toulouse Street, where I always stayed when in the quarter. All the times I've stayed there, I never had any ghostly happenings, but I always stayed upstairs in a room with a balcony where my parents were staying out in the courtyard by the pool. My mother was in her bed doing her nails. My dad was in the shower. She didn't see anything, but she felt somebody sit down on the corner of the bed. After my mother's dog passed away, she also swears she heard him snoring next to her while she was resting out on the patio. Chapter 18, Fort Mifflin. This was posted November 2nd, 2010. I'll try this again just once more. I had only just completed this story to have it vanish into thin air, which is always annoying. I'm relentless, I know it, but Fort Mifflin is haunted too. It was bone-chillingly cold. My teeth wouldn't stop chattering. I was dressed warm enough too. First stop on our tour was the house with the biggest fireplace and the cauldron. Upon entering, I heard somebody clambering around upstairs, although supposedly nobody was up there. There was a girl standing in front of me, only every time out of the corner of my eye, I'd see a heavy-set man with a beard at her back. When I'd look straight at her, he would be gone. At the same time, I was watching out the window towards one of the casements, the old Hobbit Hole prisons. A large group had just entered the hill, but I could see something going on outside the entrance, something like a flickering mist, but with human motion. I tried to take some photographs, but they turned out black. In fact, all of my photos of the casements and a lot of the other pictures would just come up black. Out of curiosity, after getting home, I enhanced these black pictures. These are the pictures of the colored orbs. My camera did seem to be acting up, but I don't have any orb issues with it. They look more like bubbles and lights. And the lights were there. I doubt these are all dust and insects. Anyways, I think that ghost would come out of the hill just to avoid getting squished by the crowd. I did get the sense of a little girl out on the grounds, but this could have been pure suggestion. I did think I saw something cloudy mussing about just beyond the big wooden doors near the flag as well. Some people report bad feelings from the old cells. I didn't have any, but there were bad smells, easily attributed to any of the large tours shuffling around. The ghost hunters said that a light came on upstairs in the officers' quarters. Perhaps, but that may have been due to an airplane, as an airport is next door. The lights from the planes are so bright to light up the windows. I think that's why the screaming lady still screams. Still, besides the orbs, if you look closely, you can see lots of ghosts picked up by night vision camera that deceived my eyes. First, the pictures of the big White House. There's a lady in a long white nightgown on the far right end of the top balcony. She looks candlelit. She wasn't there. Nobody was on the top balcony, but the crowd on the porch are all breathing. Also, the cannons in front of the same house look closer to the snouts. Between them, a somewhat transparent man in a Civil War uniform is standing. He's wearing a cap and his arms are crossed or something. The dark head and shoulders visage as approaching the fort cannot be mistaken, and it is very scary, as he was not there either. Nobody was. The lady shows herself again in the front right-hand side of the picture of the long, single-storied house. She's in the nightgown again, candlelit this time, more transparent. Looks as if she's crying. Her hair looks unwashed, as if she's been in bed for a long time, maybe. The photograph of a large white orb in front of the blacksmith shop is definitely interesting. That wasn't a plane, I know, because I had waited for the planes to pass to take that picture. It's like a huge ball of energy or something. This one did not turn out black originally either, and it's not the moon. Besides the flag, the other dark orbed photos are of the casements, for the most part. I find them to be intriguing. You may think what you will, but I think Fort Mifflin is haunted. Chapter 19. Strange but True. I realize I seem to binge on these ghost stories. Then you won't hear another from me for a year, but that's just how it goes. Besides, these are not really ghost stories, but I'm not sure what to call them or make of them. I just know they're true. I've told a few of these tales, but they haven't gotten around since they're so weird. But since they don't have anything to do with the little people, so far as I know, I ought to document them in order. First, I used to drive Route 30, the old Lincoln Highway, a lot. It's a favorite winding mountainous road. Once while I was in Gettysburg with my best friend, she had a nightmare. It was on Route 30 and I had wrecked. She was very scared. I always said you'd have to be a fool to drive the road during a snowstorm. Of course, I became that fool. It was a freak snowstorm in March and the hills became a sheet of ice. I'd totally lost control of my car and was tearing down the mountain with my light flashing before my eyes. It's awfully cliche, but anybody that has had this happen to them knows that's the only description for it. I'd reached something of a peace. I wasn't really scared of my certain death off the side of the mountain when in my mind's eye, as that's the only way to describe it, as I didn't actually see this, but knew as sure as anything that my car was stopped by a big hand in a cloud. It was like the Ace of Cups, if you want the truth. At the same moment, my car not only miraculously stopped, but I had to turn the key to start it back up. I think it was God. And I've been a hardcore fatalist since. Next, fast forward a few years, New Orleans. I've heard voices in my head while in New Orleans, literally screaming at me. They seem to come with those little rogue storms they have down there. The thing of it was those voices were right. I didn't recognize them, nor do I pretend to know who they were or where they came from. Although I've spent a lot of time in New Orleans, besides just feelings, unfortunately, I have no great personal ghost stories from there. Just this, which is weird as it gets. I was staying in an old manor on Lake Pontchartrain. While asleep, something bit me so hard to wake me. I jumped up, certain to find a snake in the bed. It was so real that I was convinced then that a snake must be hiding in the box springs. Nothing. It wasn't an insect. Nothing was there. Still, I had a hard time sleeping there after that. Finally, I must conclude with some familiar spirits. I never saw my grandfather like I did my grandma, although it could have been him that put his hand on my shoulder. But my cousin, who as a boy had inherited his old room, used to not only see him, but chat with him. This I believe, as he came along after Grandpa's passing, and Grandpa would have wanted to know him. We had a lot of tragedies in the family, unmentionables, that I can't discuss, but I can allude to what happened. A family member that I was as close to as anybody was passed away. I hadn't been back to that house since it had happened years. My other aunt came to live there, and I was visiting with her last summer. It was August, very hot, upper 80s that day. I was outside on the back porch, close as anything where it had happened, and it was so cold back there as to give me goosebumps up and down. I didn't stick around back there for long, I assure you. This relative of mine had been known to stir up some trouble back in his time, and I wouldn't want to tempt him. Ghosts, Chapter 20. I only just realized that I've totally neglected mentioning another haunted house in the place where I grew up. I can't really call this a secondhand ghost story, but it does involve my two best friends. They had more experiences there than I. The one lived there, but I can vouch to say it's haunted. The house is just a couple of streets away from my grandparents' old house, and in fact, the ghost there knew my grandparents too. It belonged to my best friend's ex-husband's grandparents. It was the grandfather who haunted the house. First, while there, I did get the strange feeling that somebody else was around, and I could hear somebody upstairs when nobody was up there. I asked my friend about it, and she said, "Oh yeah, it's Brian's grandfather. Sometimes he spies on me, and I get the willies." Also, she would have strange dreams while sleeping there. And for a while, the grandmother, his wife, was away in a home before she passed away. She kind of lost it and would think that she was back at home with her husband sometimes. She would even call cabs to try to get back home, although she actually didn't really know where she was at that time. Anyways, my first experience while there was when my friend gave a sex party. Not an orgy or anything, just one of those sassy sensation parties where women get together to buy sex toys, lingerie, and things like that. Well, the hostess went to make a champagne toast when suddenly the glasses just shattered out of nowhere all over her. I said Brian's grandfather doesn't like that. The next thing was even weirder. I had brought my other friend over for the first time. We were all out on the porch while my friend went to the bathroom. When she got back, I said, "Do you want to leave?" I don't know why at the time, since we hadn't been there very long, but she just looked funny and very white, whiter than usual. She said, "Yeah," so we left. A couple of weeks later, she told me what had really happened to her while she was in the bathroom. Getting ready to pee, she heard an old man's voice say, "Get out." The first time scared her. The second time, she said, "Okay, I'm trying." Then, the day of my friend's wedding, as they'd been living there a bit before they got married, I was upstairs in one of the bedrooms. There was a lot of commotion downstairs at the time with the wedding party and pictures. The door shut First, I thought somebody was playing a prank on me, but when I couldn't unlock the door that only locked from the inside, I got scared and started beating on it and yelling for somebody to let me out, as I was afraid they'd forget about me and leave without me with all the wedding day distractions. The door did eventually open and let me out, but it was pretty scary. They don't live there anymore, but I'm betting the grandfather still does. Chapter 21. These next couple of stories have happened over the last couple of months. The ghosts seem rampant lately. First, I was driving the same road as always. I happen to be on this road at least once a week. It's a rather dangerous intersection, but I've never noticed anything strange about it. Except for this one instance. I was waiting behind several other cars when I saw a gold sedan coming from the other lane right at me. There was nowhere to go, and I was certain that the car was going to drive right into me. This all happened very fast, as accidents do. I didn't notice anybody in the car. Then the car just vanished. It was as if it disappeared right into my car. It seemed very real and solid, as if it was really there. It couldn't have gone anywhere else. Looking all around, the car was just gone. I suppose it was a ghost car. I don't know what else it could have been. Next, I was waiting for somebody in the parking lot of their bank. This wasn't my bank. As I was waiting there, a beige car drove up to go through the drive-thru. I thought it was pretty weird that somebody dressed in brown, I couldn't even tell if it was a man or a woman, as once again this happened pretty fast, opened up the back door of that car and just sort of toppled out. The car was pulling up pretty slowly, but it never did completely stop. This passenger, too, looked very solid and real, but once they were out of the car, they had just disappeared, too. I looked all around. There was no place they could have gotten to that fast, even if they were running, which they weren't. I wondered if the driver knew that they had a ghostly hitchhiker on board that wanted out at the bank. I then relayed this story to the lady that I was waiting for because I had wondered if they might be somehow connected to her. She tried to make up a lot of excuses as to where they might have gone, so I was pretty sure that she didn't believe me and decided to drop it. I still wonder about it, though. Then the ghosts here. Sometimes at night I can see them outside the French doors, but when I look again, they're gone. I still don't know about them, but last week I saw one out there in stark daylight. That's a first. I thought it was a real person, but there wasn't anybody out there. Last but not least, Captain Hood. Captain Hood was one of the first graduates of West Point. He died in the 1840s. He was in his 30s. His tomb was robbed. The robbers stole his body and tossed it all around. It was never recovered. There was a monument there too, but it has since been moved. While there I could hear somebody walking around behind me. There wasn't anybody there. But if you look towards the end of my video, one of the last stills to the upper right hand corner, you can see him just where I heard him rustling about. Now, I'm not certain if this is connected to Captain Hood or not, because on our way to the tomb, we also passed a motorcycle accident where a man, also in his 30s, was killed. But right after returning home, before I got a chance to look at the photographs, something tugged on my shirt twice. Another interesting thing is that Ron also made a video of the tomb, only on his phone. Now that phone is possessed. Since he made that video, it only flashes this strange screen and won't work at all otherwise. Other people say that they call and leave messages and that it works. But it doesn't. It won't even ring. It's dead. Captain Hood's tomb. The ghost of Captain Hood to Possum Hollow is bound, searching out his stolen body that was scattered all around. In a thorny thicket, the crow has built his nest, crying for the captain. Still, he cannot rest. The stones, they are a ruin. The bones return to clay. But Captain Hood still lingers, longing for the day. Chapter 22. First, the day of the earthquake. I felt the earthquake. It rattled the kitchen, cupboards, and dishes. I actually went outside. Later that same afternoon, I was out in the garden. When I came back in the house, the ghost was standing in the foyer. At first, I thought it was Ron again, like before. That's how it really looked, only Ron was not home yet. You can never be sure if these ghosts are father or son, as maybe the father appears as he was when he was younger sometimes. I say that as I believe this was the father, the one who built the house, but they both come around from time to time. Then Gettysburg. Several things have happened in Gettysburg the last couple of trips. First, I have my new video camera and was recording around the old cyclorama. Ron was there, and so was my witch. It was creepy. It smelled so bad, like death. The wind was howling and it was summertime. I actually thought I'd get an earache. It was so cold. I was sure my camera was going to pick up on all sorts of creepy things, but nothing recorded. I was there again in October. Just after getting there on a very warm and sunny day, I had to get my jacket out of the car as I was experiencing some dreadful cold spells. Then on to the National Cemetery, as it's always my first stop. There are a lot of ghosts that live there. I think some of them are rebels in unmarked graves, as they didn't bury the rebels. Anyways, Ron had said something to me that irked me then. And this is where it's actually pretty funny. I heard a very loud, rude noise. Assuming it was Ron, I decided not to say anything about it since we were in the cemetery out of respect. Only later when I confronted him with it, he swore it wasn't him. So I think it must have been directed at him. I do. Some of those ghosts have gotten used to me visiting them there. That same day, Ron was ascending the lookout tower with my camera while I was down in the woods on Culp's Hill. Culp's Hill is frighteningly haunted, especially at night. I was first hearing movement and whistling in the surrounding shrubs, and it wasn't birds. Then I looked up into the clearing trying to see who might be making the noise. There was a dark figure, all browns, raggedy, featureless, looking back at me. I couldn't see the bottom of his legs either. Then he vanished. I got all sorts of creepy pictures in Hamburg. Ron says it's all my camera and the lights, but I don't think that explains them when a few of the pictures are fine, and my camera fully charged all out and died when we reached the bridge. And the camera works fine again now. Anyways, we had eaten at the old hotel at the crossroads at Hex Street before. I knew it was haunted then. In Hamburg, Hex Street leads to Witch's Hill, where the witches dance naked with the devil. Not me, of course. But I did see a ghost on the bridge. It was just a very dark figure, not very tall. I could sense it as well as seeing it. But I really have no idea where some of the crazy pictures come from. You can check out these videos on my YouTube channel. There is also a ghost kitten behind the house. I've seen and heard her mewing. She's a little calico, maybe 4 months old. She makes me very sad. I've seen her during the day, but she cries at night. I've gone out calling at night for her, but she's not there. Finally, just today, I saw another ghost car, which is what got me to writing down the stories. It was a 50s style hearse with a chrome grille, bumper, and mirrors. It was falling behind the fire truck, which had the sirens wailing. Then it vanished. That's how I know it was a ghost car. Chapter 23. The following story has occurred over the past several months. In fact, the first sighting should have been included in my last installment, only I forgot. It seems to me that this ghost does not want to be forgotten, so I've decided to get on this, even though I've been busy with other things. We live across the street from a Romanian church. The Mass is still given in Romanian. The building itself, I've been told, used to be a barn, so you may imagine that my Catholic friends laugh at this church, but I've always thought it was rather charming. I've never been inside, but I walk Shiner around the grounds often. The story actually begins with a funeral. Several months ago, Ron was away on business when I noticed that somebody must have died. I knew it wasn't a typical funeral either, for although the parking lot is expansive, the cars were parked all the way up the entire street.